And it is Earth Week here on Sun Radio. I'm Kevin Connor, and Allison Watkins from the Austin Parks Foundation is here. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
We've talked before about stuff going way back to the involvement of the Parks Foundation at the ACL Fest. You
Absolutely.
do that every year, don't you?
We sure do. Yes.
Except last year.
Yes.
Should be back this year.
Yes, we certainly are excited and hopeful.
And I've talked to other people at Austin Parks Foundation about the work that you all do. It is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. It is not part of the city parks department.
That's correct.
But kind of a bridge between the parks system and the people that get to use and enjoy the parks.
Absolutely.
What's your overall mission for the Austin Parks Foundation?
You know, the mission of the organization is pretty simple. We're there to partner with the community to make our parks, trails, and green spaces better. So again, we're there to fill the gap in funding and in resources and in volunteers and in advocacy. So, you know, we want to be that bridge, and not just for one space in Austin, but for all nearly 300 spaces that exist across our city.
300 parks.
Yes, we're very
in
lucky.
Austin and Travis County.
Correct.
Or just in the city of Austin?
In Austin, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Some of them are rather well known.
Yes.
And very well loved.
Very well loved.
The last time I went by Zilker Park a couple of weekends ago on a Sunday, it looked like there was a music festival happening. Just no stages, just tons and tons of people.
Yes. And I think, you know, the good thing about that is that it speaks to, I mean, we've all seen it the last couple of weekends, and it's like, I think people are just so excited, you know, and when you think about life getting back to normal, the parks is part of that. And again, wanting to be outside and enjoying, you know, all that Austin has to offer. But, you know, there's big problems with everybody just going to Zilker Park or to one specific location.
Right. Zilker gets a lot of, almost getting loved to death, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe the same with Auditory Shores, or Vic Mathias Shores. A lot of people get down there, not quite as much.
Yeah. And the green belt, you know, again, and it makes sense, you know, those kind of areas that are right down in the middle of the city. It takes a lot of effort to kind of learn about new places and to go kind of off the beaten path. And so it's easy to kind of go to what's familiar, and those spaces are amazing. And so we want to encourage use of them, but we want to get people to be smart, and mainly around those parks downtown. So much of it is about how people get there, and, you know, using other modes of transportation and finding different ways to get to those spaces, and not relying on people driving their cars and getting to Zilker Park and being frustrated about not finding a place to park. So
those are the big ones that get a lot of use, and really, especially the greenbelt abuse from people. Not everybody is a caring, environmentally aware person that goes down to the greenbelt. They're going down there to hang out, have fun, party.
Yes.
And sometimes they leave a lot of stuff behind. One would think it would be their responsibility for taking care of that, but that's not always true.
Yeah. You know, I mean, again, I know we're talking kind of Earth Day, and it's hokey and cheesy to say, but, you know, at Austin Parks Foundation, it's like, we want every day to be Earth Day, especially in the city of Austin. And, you know, so much about, you know, the green belt and kind of people's love, but then people's frustration with it is just that it can kind of get, you know, overused, and there's a lot of garbage. But it's one of those things that, like, it needs to be everybody's personal responsibility. We talk a lot in our organization about leave no trace, and what PART is trying to do around that. It's like, you take it in, you take it out.
Right.
Like, it's not somebody else's job to clean up your garbage. And especially, again, given COVID and just restrictions on PART staff, you know, the Parks and Recreation Department, their maintenance crews work so hard, and they've been cut, you know, extremely given COVID. And so we can't have just everyone's attitude be, well, someone else is just going to clean this up for me. It should be that, you know, again, people care about those spaces, that they either, you know, have the wherewithal to clean up right then and there, or to go back to those spaces to make sure that they're cleaned up and beautified over the years.
And we're not just pointing a finger at you millennials. Everybody. Oh,
old Austinites. Yeah. New Austinites. I think that sometimes, again, people just take for granted that we have these spaces, and, you know, it's kind of that idea that, well, there'll be somebody here to clean it up, but it should be you.
Yeah. It should be the person that brought the can.
Exactly.
Or the cigarette butt in the first place. Yeah.
Yes.
Are there some undiscovered gems? I mean, we know about the famous places, but are there some just great parks in the Austin area that people should know more about?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I should say on Austin Parks website, so austinparks.org, we have a parks database that is basically the full database of every park and green space in Austin. And you can search it by amenity or thing you like to do. So
Oh,
depending
really?
on what it is that you like, if you like basketball, if you like hiking, if you want to park for dogs, you can go on there and you can search for anything that you might like to do, and it'll pull things up. But yeah, I mean, my family, we've discovered so many great little parks, especially during COVID as a,
Oh,
as
yeah.
a mom of two young boys, especially in those early days where I was just trying to think of how can we just get outside. And it was a great, opportunity to explore new places. And so our favorite so far, and it's not undiscovered, but St. Edward's Park, which is actually in West Austin past Bull Creek, is an amazing series of trails that, it's not by St. Edward's University,
Right.
but
It's not connected at all. It just
exactly.
happens to be called that.
Exactly. Is a great place. Like if you like hiking on the Greenbelt and places like that, like it's a great area for discovery.
Spicewood Springs Road, west of 360.
Absolutely. You know it. You know it.
I
And
may have
places,
checked out the database.
yeah. And for
I've
play,
lived here a long time
you
too.
have. And playscapes, in places that parents are looking to take kids. Colony Park is a park that was just created last year in far northeast Austin. But talk about an amazing space and playground. It's huge. It also happens to have an amazing view of the city because it's elevated kind of in that way where you get a whole view of the downtown skyline being up there
Really?
in northeast Austin. And so, yeah, there's just great
Colin?
spaces. Colony Park District Park.
Colony
So
Park
yeah,
District.
Colony Park
Okay.
is kind of the
Okay.
neighborhood, and then Colony Park District Park. And that's a perfect example of that playground and that park that exists only really exists because of the amazing neighbors that live in that neighborhood who for decades since the 70s have advocated to have that green space built. And they worked their tails off. And to see what has come to fruition after years and years and decades of advocacy for wanting a green space for that community, it's just great to be able to see.
Yeah. So the neighborhood just said, we want our park.
Absolutely. And that, again, it kind of goes to, what you and I were talking about earlier around access and people in this city, there's about a 40% of Austinites don't have access to a park within a 10-minute walk. So again,
wow.
Parks and Recreation and the mayor and organizations like ours are really committed to making sure that that happens over the next decade and making sure that people, no matter where they live, have access. And so, a lot of our underserved communities or under-resourced communities, they're kind of working from behind in a lot of ways because that infrastructure wasn't built, years and years ago. And so we are trying to help facilitate making sure that communities all across this city, that kids and families are able to get out and to enjoy nature.
It wasn't always a requirement that there be parks when you built a new neighborhood.
Right.
Sometimes there would be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great trail system near my house in Oak Hill. We're very lucky. We have our choice of a bunch of great parks to go to within walking distance. But part of it was there was a floodplain and they couldn't build houses there. So it became a greenbelt trail, which is fine. And that's what, 10 houses away from my house.
Yeah.
And once I get on that trail, I could get all the way down to Zilker Park on trails, on the Violet Crown Trail and everything like that.
The Violet Crown Trails.
We're lucky. Now, there are people building houses as fast as they can here in Austin with what land is left and Travis County. And I know your work kind of extends beyond the city limits. And but are those new communities, are they required to provide park space?
So the current land development code, and I will say I'm not the expert on our team. We have a great advocacy team that is there to kind of dive into this. The land development code has been in flux for a while now. There's been stuff that's been put on the ballot and then it's been taken away, and it's been, trying to revamp it. And part of that is the parkland dedication that exists within kind of the land development code. And so currently, yes, there are rules and stipulations about either land or dollars that have to be allocated allocated in order to, if there's not within an immediate area that you're building in room to add a green space, then you contribute dollars that then go to helping create new green space. But, I think, again, there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of folks that want to see those rules changed. And so we're eagerly anticipating what the next kind of phase of the land development code looks like, and figuring out how parkland dedication fits within that. And so, we're going to be, big advocates for maintaining, the idea that green space and preserving green space, creating new green space is part of that code.
So you have lawyers that volunteer their services to your organization.
Well, I think it's much more what we are really interested in is educating the community and having, instead of lawyers, making sure that, neighbors know what that code means and advocate at the city council level with their city council member to say, this is why this is important and why I want it to stay. We are all about empowering the community and making sure that Austin Parks Foundation is not coming in and telling a community what it needs, but really kind of giving tools and resources and then empowering the community to help advocate for what they want. And so, from an advocacy perspective, when we go before City Hall every year for around the budget, we're bringing advocates, not staff and lawyers, but having those kind of people help inform and educate community members, because when it comes from their voices and they're really passionate about what they want to see, that's when we actually can make change.
Do you work with developers?
So, again, yes. And especially there are definitely those that are very parks and green space centric.
Right.
I think people know that is why people want to move to Austin.
Right.
People don't, yes, there are people who love, the fancy buildings and they love all that downtown has to offer. But a big selling point of coming to Austin, being part of Austin, is the green space piece. So there are definitely those developers that are, interested in making sure that green space is preserved, green space is created, that it is something that is maintained throughout this city, because they know that that's why people want to move here and stay here.
Yeah. Talking with Allison Watkins about the Austin Parks Foundation, austinparks.org. Other volunteer opportunities. Obviously, you probably do have a few experts in development codes and things like that helping out. But what other volunteer opportunities are there with Austin Parks?
We want people to get their hands dirty. That's where we were founded. So 30 years ago, when our organization was created, it was mainly a way where people could give back by volunteering and helping to mulch trees and helping to plant flowers and helping to, do cleanups. And so it's been a huge bummer the past year not to be able to do that because we can't gather.
Right.
But finally, with stage 3 restrictions, we're able to have small groups. So we've got a couple of volunteer projects coming up with groups of 10. So it's one of those things we did a couple last week, and because they're limited in size, the signups go really quickly. So we definitely encourage people to keep their eyes on our website, because our hope is we continue to do more and more of those. But then, as we talked about earlier, we also really are encouraging individual and solo cleanups. We've got a lot of tools and resources on our website of how people can do that. We hope to very soon have a very cool we have an online store, and we're trying to launch a kind of a cleanup kit so that it has your gloves and your trash grabbers and your bags, everything you would need to keep in the back of your car. So if you're going to the green belt and you want to make sure you get that garbage cleaned up, that you can do it super easy.
And it's okay.
Yes.
For an individual citizen to take a bag and their gloves and stuff and go to the park and clean up a little bit.
Absolutely.
Nobody's going to say, hey, that's my job.
No, again, I think parks and recreation, we want people to be safe. And so again, having the right tools is important, and not just picking up everything with your hands. But it is, yes. Again, I think everyone welcomes the help. And that's something that for years, days like It's My Park Day, which is our signature volunteer day that happens twice a year, where we put 4,000 people in the parks, and we weren't able to do it last year in the fall. We were able to sneak it in spring, right before COVID happened. But for fall last year, it was kind of an all virtual event and getting people to go out into their communities. And we saw a huge success with that of people. They kind of reported back to us. We had an online portal where they could share what activities and events that they did in their own neighborhoods and communities. And it was just great seeing kids and families and individuals going out and giving back and giving some love to their parks.
And you have opportunities this week, Earth Week, to do that. And again, the information on those is at austinparks.org. But you've got an Earth Day garden revamp at Overton Elementary which is pretty close to that Colony Park that
That's
you were
right.
talking about, off of
Absolutely.
Loyola in Northeast Austin. So what are you asking people to do on a program like that?
Yes, so that is one of those. It'll be a hot ticket in terms of volunteering because it's a small group. But you're right, Overton Elementary, again, it sits right next to Colony Park. So again, if you're interested in volunteering with your family, and getting your kids to get out and giving back, but then you can also go and enjoy an awesome playscape. It's a great project to do. But they're going to be they're doing some work in greenifying the school park there, because we've been working a lot with AISD. Some people don't know there's a lot of joint use parks in the city where, again, when we talk about access, certain neighborhoods, the only green space that exists is a school playground from the
Right.
elementary school that's there. So there's a joint partnership with AISD and Parks and Recreation to make sure that in non-school hours that anybody in the community can access those spaces. And so we do a lot with kind of the Green Schoolyards program, which is great for neighborhoods, but also makes it so kids that are going to school have access to nature during the school day, that teachers can teach outside, and so this project specifically, I think, is going to be kind of greenifying, getting that site ready so that the kind of green outdoor classrooms can be put in.
Again, Allison, who's with the strategy department, head of strategy. Now I'm going to say strategery every time. And that bit's like 12 years old or so.
But
From
it never grows old if you're
No,
of a certain,
it's
generation.
always funny. But you all have restored the Zilker train, the
Yes.
little kid train, the
It's
Zilker Park, which hasn't run for a couple of
it
years.
it hasn't. And I have to tell you again, being a native Austinite, being here a really long time, being, somebody that loves the old Austin, but
Mhm.
again, very excited for all that is to come for our city. It's so exciting to be part of this project. So yes, the Zilker Zephyr that was the last. So, well, I should go back. So the Zilker train has run in Zilker Park for 60 years.
Mhm.
So it's this year actually is its 60th anniversary. And so before it was the Zephyr, it was the Zilker Eagle for a long, long time. And then the Zephyr went out of commission in 2019 after we had one of those horrible rainstorms and part of the track was eroded. And so unfortunately, it kind of had to be put on hold. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Zilker Park right now is in kind of what the city Parks and Recreation Department has said is the vision planning phase, to work through a plan of envisioning what the next decade of Zilker Park looks like. So they're actually gathering community feedback right now to figure out what kind of Zilker Park will look like in the next decade. And then we'll put forth a plan of what that would be. And so in this weird interim period, they came to us as a long-term partner and said, would you guys have any interest in getting this train back up and running? We're kind of in this weird interim period until we see kind of what improvements and what the new Zilker Park will look like. But everyone loves the train. Everybody wants the train to come back. And so we're excited. Yes, we are. We have every hope of launching the train and it being up and running by kind of early fall, September of this year.
Cool.
It'll be a brand new train. So a new train, and with a new train comes a new name. So we ran a naming competition last year. We had more than 700 names.
I remember that. There were some pretty wacky names.
Yes, and we had thousands of votes. And so on the 23rd, so in just a few weeks, we're going to announce the new brand and the new name. And then from an environmental standpoint, it'll be the first time that the train will be all electric.
Nice.
And so obviously that's a very environmentally sensitive zone there with the Edwards Aquifer and Barton Springs. And so we want it to be as clean as possible. But yeah, that kitty train's coming back. And I can say it's going to be really exciting.
It's been a while since I've ridden it.
Well,
we used to ride it a lot about
yes.
26, 27 years ago.
Well, we're going to invite you out and we want you to be on that thing because that's the other thing is, we talk to a lot of Austinites and they're like, oh, I don't have kids. I don't want to ride the train. We want to make sure that this train is welcome to everybody. So again, we're going to put forth efforts to make sure that anybody and everybody that wants to ride this train can. And also we're making sure that it is.
Who is that man all by himself at the back of the train?
No, again, but if you're out there to enjoy Zilker Park and that experience, it'll be awesome. And it'll also be accessible. So again, one of those things that is about inclusivity and wanting everybody in Austin, regardless of, you're in the past, there was one train car that was available to people who were in a wheelchair. We'll have multiple cars that are accessible in that way. And it'll really be an inclusive experience so that anybody in Austin, regardless of kind of your mobility, will be able to participate.
So you've been planning all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
What else is real big this year that you're looking forward to?
Well, again, It's My Park Day. So It's My Park Day would normally have been, the spring one would have been March, the first weekend in March.
Right.
We have pushed that to June, hoping that we'll be able to probably not do as large as we normally do, but our anniversary, which will be our 29th anniversary, which we're calling, it's kind of our last hurrah before we get into our dirty 30s. We will be, hopefully getting volunteers out in force on that day. So we're excited for that. And then, like you mentioned earlier, we are crossing our fingers that ACL Fest will be coming back, because again, that event supports our work so much, and the fans that attend that event generously support APF.
Austin Parks Foundation is the named charity organization for the ACL Fest.
Yes. And so again, we've been partners for 15 years.
Right.
The fans who attend that festival have generously donated more than $41 million to the parks. And so that the funds that come from ACL Fest then get reinvested in not just Silker, but again, the 300 parks across this city.
So that must have been a terrible hit to y'all's budget last year.
It was really hard. Yeah. I mean, it like so many others, we were, you had to reevaluate. We had to make hard cuts. We had to change things. But, again, I think, we did what we needed to do, and we're lucky that we're still able to do a good majority of the work that we set out to do last year. And we're just hoping that that event comes back again, not only because of what it brings to this city, but, also it's a great educational opportunity for us. We run the sustainability efforts through the festival. So they have greening programs that are all about recycling and composting. And it's a great way for us to kind of educate people on, hey, you're in this space, but let's take care of it while you're here.
Right.
And so, we're excited and hopeful that we can get back out and doing that work.
All right. Well, I think that the Austin Parks Foundation does great work, again, kind of bridging what the city parks department can do and to get out to people. How do we stand as far as parks compared to other cool cities in America?
So
how are we doing?
There's a great resource called the Trust for Public Lands that every year puts out a park score kind of database that basically it ranks the top 100 most populous cities as to how they, create how their park infrastructure works. So it's based on things like how much acreage do you have? What is your investment in parks? What are the amenities that your parks has? And then around that access piece. And so of the 100 most populous cities, currently Austin ranks 37th. So we're not horrible, but we're not.
We rank
great.
higher than that on all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're that
margaritas
top spot.
Consumed,
Exactly.
Tacos munched.
Yes.
We're like number 2 in the country.
And so when you look at, those cities that are really at the very top. So for the longest time, Minneapolis and St. Paul have always been 1 and 2, like that whole area.
Isn't that interesting? That you would think that an area that's so cold for so much of the year, but when it's okay to get out,
Oh, yes.
They get out.
Absolutely.
They get after it.
Yeah. And then big cities. I mean, it's weird I always refer to I don't think of Austin as a big city. I know we're the 11th largest city in the world, but when again, a lot of these cities that are on the top of that list are places like San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, even New York City, like big cities. And a lot of it has to do with investment. So again, I think it's like $147, $150 per person in Austin is kind of what goes to parks in terms of tax dollars.
But as far as New York, I remember I think it was in the 70s and the budget cuts were happening and they were falling, the Central Park falling into great disrepair.
Absolutely.
And a private conservancy of volunteers
absolutely
really brought it back to life.
Yes.
You have to.
Absolutely. And made it, I mean, just think about what that city would be without that. And it's just a huge part of who it is. And they invest in it. And I think even with that conservancy that came about with the Central Park Conservancy, that then really shined a light on the importance of that green space. And then it made the city then reinvest in all of the green spaces in New York. And so, I think it's just one of those things that we don't invest as much per person in terms of tax dollars in our parks as some of these other cities do.
Hmm.
But the part that we kind of do the worst at is around amenities. And so what things exist in these spaces, and are they meeting the needs of communities? And then also about access. I mean, that's kind of where we have the hardest time, is just, again, we're at that, about 60% of people can get to a park very easily, just going outside and walking. But a lot of our neighbors don't have that luxury.
So that's one thing you need to work on in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. So parkland acquisition, again, that's something that the Parks and Recreation Department, they're really focused on. They've got, a new 10-year plan. And so much of that is about how can they acquire new land? How can
Yeah.
they get, more green spaces? And really what we're helping to figure out is how can we also really creatively and interestingly use green space. So there's been a lot of these pocket parks that have sprung up lately, where
Mhm.
it's like you take a median that is in a neighborhood that's big enough where you can do something like put a small playscape on it, or put, an area where someone can walk their dog. And so, trying to use space creatively and making, Austin a real green city that, embraces that.
I think it was your CEO, Colin, who pointed out when we talked a couple of years ago that there are about 600 nonprofits in Central Texas.
6,000.
6,000. Yeah.
Yes,
6,000.
that's a lot.
And some of them are also parks and nature oriented,
Yes.
like the Trail Foundation.
Absolutely.
Do you guys have some kind of communication within all the different organizations to
Yes.
try to make sense of things?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, a lot of the conservancies, there are a handful of other organizations that kind of, again, work across the city. Something like Keep Austin Beautiful, though it's not a green space organization, but definitely about, cleaning and beautifying our city, especially within green spaces, that works across the city. Most conservancies are really specific to one green space. So you've got amazing groups like the Trail Foundation and Peace Park Conservancy, the new Waterloo Greenway that's going in. And we work really hard to partner with those groups. So, again, some of it is about us providing funding to those organizations for specific projects, for working on volunteerism with them. But a lot of our work is done around advocacy and how can we collectively work as a group to make sure that things like the parks budget is increased year over year. Yeah. So
somebody's got to stand up for the parks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Parks and Recs when the budget comes up.
Yeah, because we're all doing our own thing and we're raising money and that kind of thing. But we know the biggest impact comes from, city dollars and the city budget being increased in that way.
How do people get involved in the Parks Foundation? Is it a membership thing or just a donation?
No. Yeah. So again, we have, again, a real need for dollars. As we talked about, again, last year, well, if, in the last couple of years, kind of the revenue generated from ACL Fest back to our organization is about $6 million. So last year there was $6 million that didn't come back to Austin Parks Foundation. So again, contributions are something that we are always seeking. We have ways where people can do that to specific parks. So one of the things that APF is really proud of is that we act as kind of an umbrella organization for about 120 different park and neighborhood groups. So if you live in your neighborhood and you want to adopt your neighborhood park and invest in that as part of your neighborhood association or a civic group, you can do that. And we act as your financial stewards. So you don't have to go create your own 501c3.
Right.
You come to us, we act as your umbrella and give you tools and resources
The
and all
Friends
that
of
stuff.
Dick Nichols Park.
Exactly, which is a great one to have as an example. They've been at it a long time.
So there is an organization.
Oh yeah, Dick Nichols is amazing. Those guys have been, they take a lot of pride in their park.
I should look into that.
Yeah,
that's the closest park to me.
Oh, absolutely. And we have a grants program, so they can apply for grants and we can make things happen, like building new playscapes or just putting in things like trash receptacles. And so with that, people can give to those specific parks if they care about that. But, unrestricted revenue is really the best thing for a nonprofit, and giving your dollars so that we can put it to the best use. And so that's a way. But again, we also know that, financial contributions aren't something everybody's able to do, especially after the last year. And so again, volunteering, becoming knowledgeable about the things that we do. We've got great resources. We've come into the podcast realm recently. We launched a Parks Cast to talk about green space issues and have experts come on. So just
clever name.
Yes, thank you. Our marketing team did that, not me. But just, again, trying to get people to educate around like the importance of these issues within our city. And then again, becoming advocates, becoming volunteers. It's really whatever way in which you want to give back. But I'm always a little bit overwhelmed by, how many people are now in our city. But we know that so many of them come to this city or stay here because they love being outdoors. They love the green spaces.
Right.
They love the trail. They love the lake. They love all of that. But when you really look at then how many people invest and engage, again, I've worked at other nonprofits and I would have thought that like, oh, everybody wants to give to the parks. It's the thing everybody loves. But it's not necessarily that way. Again, there's a lot of
True.
competition. There's 6,000 nonprofits,
Yeah.
a lot of worthy causes. But we just say, again, if you care about the outdoor space in Austin, you care about parks, you care about green spaces, you care about where your kids will grow up, and you care about where you can take your dog, we're a place you can spend your time and resources.
Excellent. And the website is a great resource, austinparks.org. And Allison, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank
and
you. Always.
Lots of Earth Week stuff going on
Yes.
with the Parks Foundation. So get involved in that. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.